James and the Giant Peach, Chapter 29. It seemed like a long time before the seagulls were able to pull the peach away from that horrible rainbow cloud. But they managed it at last, and then everybody gathered around the wretched centipede and began arguing about the best way to get the paint off his body. He really did look a sight. He was purple all over, and now that the paint was beginning to dry and harden, he was forced to sit very stiff and upright, as though he were encased in cement. And all 42 of his legs were sticking out straight in front of him like rods. He tried to say something, but his lips wouldn't move. All he could do now was to make gurgling noises in his throat. The old green grasshopper reached out and touched him carefully on the stomach. "But how could it possibly have dried so quickly?" he asked. "It's rainbow paint," James answered. "Rainbow paint dries very quick and very hard." "I detest paint," Miss Spider announced. "It frightens me. It reminds me of the time Aunt Spiker, the late Aunt Spiker, I mean, because the last time she painted her kitchen ceiling, my poor darling grandmother stepped into it by mistake when it was still wet, and there she stuck. And all through the night we could hear her calling to us, saying, 'Help, help, help!' And it was heartbreaking to listen to her. But what could we do? Not a thing until the next day, when the paint had dried. And then, of course, we all rushed over to her and calmed her down and gave her some food. Believe it or not, she lived for 6 months like that, upside down on the ceiling, with her legs stuck permanently in the paint. She really did. We fed her every day. We brought her fresh flies straight from the web. But then, on the 26th of April last, Aunt Sponge, the late Aunt Sponge, I mean, happened to glance up at the ceiling, and she spotted her. 'A spider!' she cried. 'A disgusting spider! Quick, fetch me the mop with the lock handle!' And then, oh, it was so awful I can't bear to think of it." Miss Spider wiped away a tear and looked sadly at the centipede. "You poor thing," she murmured. "I do feel sorry for you." "It'll never come off," the earthworm said brightly. "Our centipede will never move again. He will turn into a statue, and we shall all be able to put him in the middle of the lawn and the bird bath on top of his head." "We could try peeling him like a banana," the old green grasshopper suggested. "Or rubbing him with sandpaper," the ladybird said. "Now, if he stuck out his tongue," the earthworm said, smiling a little for perhaps the first time in his life. "If he stuck it out really far, then we could all catch hold of it and start pulling, and if we pulled hard enough, we could turn him inside out and he would have a new skin." There was a pause while the others suggested this interesting proposal. "I think," James said slowly, "I think the best thing to do—" Then he stopped. "What's that?" he asked quickly. "I heard a voice. I heard someone shouting." Chapter 30. They all raised their heads, listening. "Shh! There it is again!" But the voice was too far away for them to hear what it was saying. "It's the Cloud Man!" Miss Spider cried. "I just know it's the Cloud Man! They're after us again!" "It came from above," the earthworm said, and automatically everybody looked up. Everybody except the centipede, who couldn't move. "Ouch!" they said. "Help! Mercy! We're going to catch it this time!" For what they now saw, swirling and twisting directly above their heads, was an immense black cloud, a terrible, dangerous, thundery-looking thing that began to rumble and roar even as they were staring at it. And then, from high up on the top of the cloud, the faraway voice came down on them once again, this time very loud and clear. "On with the faucets!" it shouted. "On with the faucets! On with the faucets!" 3 seconds later, the hole underneath of the cloud seemed to split and burst open like a paper bag, and then out came the water. They saw it coming. It was quite easy to see because it wasn't just raindrops. It wasn't raindrops at all. It was a great, solid mass of water that might have been a lake or a whole ocean dropping out of the sky on top of them. And down it came, down and down and down, crashing first onto the seagulls and then onto the peach itself, while the poor traveller shrieked with fear and groped around frantically, for something to catch hold of. The peach stem, the silk strings, anything they could find. And all the time the water came pouring and roaring down upon them, bouncing and smashing and sloshing and slashing and swashing and swirling and surging and whirling and gurgling and gushing and rushing, and it was like being pinned down underneath the biggest waterfall in the world and not being able to get out. They couldn't speak, they couldn't see, they couldn't breathe. And James Henry Trotter, holding on madly to one of the silk strings above the peach stem, told himself this must surely be the end of everything at last. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the deluge stopped. They were out of it, and it was all over. The wonderful seagulls had flown right through it and had come out safely on the other side. Once again the giant peach was sailing peacefully through the mysterious moonlit sky. "I am drowned," gasped the old green grasshopper, spitting out water by the pint. "It's gone right through my skin," the earthworm groaned. "I always thought my skin was waterproof, but it isn't, and now I'm full of rain." "Look at me! Look at me!" shouted the centipede excitedly. "It's washed me clean, the paint's all gone, I can move again." "Oh, that's the worst news I've heard in a long time," the earthworm said. The centipede was dancing around the deck and turning somersaults in the air and singing at the top of his voice. "Oh, do shut up," the old green grasshopper said. "Look at me!" cried the centipede. Chapter 31. "How fast we are going all of a sudden," the ladybird said. "I wonder why." "I don't think the seagulls like this place any better than we do," James answered. "I imagine they want to get out of it as soon as they can. They got a bad fright in that storm we've just been through." Faster and faster flew the seagulls, skimming across the sky at a tremendous pace, with the peach trailing out behind them. Cloud after cloud went on either side, all of them ghostly white in the moonlight, and several more times during the night the travellers caught glimpses of cloud-men moving around on the top of these clouds, working their sinister magic upon the world below. Once they passed a snow machine in operation, with the cloud-men turning the handle and a blizzard of snowflakes blowing out of the great funnel above. They saw the huge drums that were used for making thunder, and the cloud-men beating them furiously with long hammers. They saw the frost factories and the wind producers, and the places where cyclones and tornadoes were manufactured and sent spinning down towards the earth. And once, deep in the hollow of a large, billowy cloud, they spotted something that could only have been a cloud-men's city. There were caves everywhere running into the cloud, and at the entrances to the caves, the cloud-men's wives were crouching over little stoves with frying pans in their hands, frying snowballs for their husbands' suppers. And hundreds of cloudsmen's children were frisking about all over the place and shrieking with laughter and sliding down the billows on the clouds on toboggans. An hour later, just before dawn, the travellers heard a soft whooshing noise above their heads, and they glanced up and saw an immense grey, bat-like creature swooping down towards them out of the dark. It circled round and round the peach, flapping its great wings slowly in the moonlight and staring at the travellers. Then it uttered a series of long, deep, melancholy cries and flew off again into the night. "Oh, I do wish the morning would come," Miss Spider said, shivering all over. "It won't be long now," James answered. "Look, it's getting lighter over there already." They all sat in silence, watching the sun as it came up slowly over the rim of the horizon for a new day.